Welcome to Taking Your Third Path, where courageous stories and hard-won wisdom guide us towards lives of intention, connection, and care.
Hi, everybody. On today's episode of Taking Your Third Path, we're talking to Leslie Forde, founder of Mom's Hierarchy of Needs and author of the book, Repair with Self-Care. Leslie and I have known each other for a very long time, and both of us are excited to change the world together. Leslie, welcome.
I am honored to be here. This is my favorite topic.
Yes. Well, the idea that we can think about our lives where we're intentional and we create time to both be successful at work, but also have time to care for the people we love, means that we need to apply a lot of the ideas that you've included in your book. For example, I really had fun just even with the title of chapter 4, where you talk about shift, trim, eliminate, repeat, and the whole idea that we can't do it all. And so we need to keep on doing this concept of maybe we have to shift our priorities or trim something back or even eliminate something. And then we have to do it all over again. Tell us more about that, Leslie.
Absolutely. I think that it's incredibly tempting when you feel like you're at a somewhat workable level and you have established some systems, whether that's at work, at home, a combination. It's tempting to just feel like you can relax into that. There's so much cognitive load, there's so much physical load and intensity with caring for a family, trying to care for yourself, managing your career, that you kind of want to set it and forget it. But unfortunately, the conditions keep changing, right? What your children need today is not going to be the same thing that they will need in a week or a month or a year. If you have aging parents, as we were talking about earlier, many of us are sandwiched, their needs are even often more dramatic and unpredictable. The conditions in the world are changing, and we are kind of living through incredibly chaotic times. It filters into everything we do, everything we feel, everything we think. And it also infects most industries with that level of hypervigilance and caution. So what we're being asked to do in our professional lives is also changing. So the system has to be flexible, and you have to be somewhat intentional about reducing your workload on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, it is a never-ending process. And when we say work, she's not just talking about paid work. It's the work of, living life, the joy of living life and the work of living life. In fact, that was the very next chapter in your book, overcoming common boundary traps. And I loved the heading, know your personal boundary triggers. And then soon after you said, have a canned response for common triggers. Tell us more about this concept of what's a trigger and how to have a canned response.
Absolutely. So most of you, I'm sure, if you think about it for more than a minute, you realize there's some themes to when you say yes, when what you really mean is no. You don't want to do it. You know it's not in your best interest, but yet you find the word yes coming out of your mouth. For me, for example, my family of origin is my personal kryptonite. So anytime my sister or my mother will ask something of me, even if it's ridiculous and I have no time for it and it's completely unreasonable, I'm probably going to say yes. If it's a volunteer assignment, as Jessica shared in the beginning, like, oh, I want to change the world. We both want to change the world for the better. A lot of us feel this way. A lot's broken. And having some personal stake in long-term change is really exciting. So I tend to say yes to almost every volunteer assignment until I get over-volunteered and have to pull back. So knowing those triggers allows you to almost come up with your canned response. I put them in my notes app. I've also put them in Google Docs where it's like, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of your advisory committee for this very important but very free thing that you need me to do, and I can't do it right now. Or let me recommend one or two other people and reach out to them to make an introduction. Or please come back to me in 6 months because my schedule will be in a different place then. So knowing that those are my, weak points, where I have like, I just feel emotionally torn about saying no, I'm usually prepared with a response, and that's helped a lot.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you write it down somewhere because, as they were hearing before, I'm helping with some elder care this week, and my siblings all play a role, and I can see that one of my siblings has this particular habit of passing the buck. And I've now made a little note somewhere of like next year when this comes up, the answer is blah blah blah. Because we all have
Mhm.
to like do our I will get resentful if I don't actually find a way to manage that boundary with her. So it can be a boundary at work, it can be a boundary at home. A very important part of living a life that includes work and something else is getting smart about boundaries. Um, there was lots more that you had suggestions around those boundary traps, but I'm going to go on to something else you and I were talking about, which is this moment of time when we become a new parent and how enormously life-changing that is. I don't think I really realized that until so many years later when I reflected back on what it was to become a new parent. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit here today, because I want to talk about why is that such a big change. But I also want to talk about how if we approach it in different ways and think differently, maybe we can expand our options and we can learn some skills that will then become useful over and over and over again as we, continue integrating work and care. So let's start by talking about this becoming a new parent and why it's just such a radical change for people when they become a new parent. Tell us about that.
Oh, it's a great question because it's rich, right? There's so much in there. There's like this identity shift and realizing that you have these incredible care responsibilities that are unlike any kind of care responsibilities you've had before. So there's a certain amount of excitement and pride that comes with that. But then there's also a lot of fear that comes with that. Like suddenly you have this little person that wants to get into everything and starts moving around and or has a fever, and you just kind of drop everything on a pretty regular basis to ensure that your child and your children are okay. So there's that emotional piece. I also think that, speaking now with my mom lens on as someone who went through the process of giving birth, there's a very physical recovery too. I remember all through my, life, I've been really lucky, and I share this in the book. Like, I had the privilege of being a healthy person. And it is a privilege, and it's something I'm aware of all the time. So suddenly feeling exhausted, like I was at a third of my battery, feeling like I needed to throw up every 5 minutes, for months at a time, um, feeling like just uncomfortable in my body and having difficulty moving around, having to travel for work and feeling sick on airplanes or getting sick on airplanes. All of that was really jarring because I'd always been lucky to be healthy. So that adjustment was big. And postpartum, the lack of sleep combined with hormonal shifts and combined with just the physical recovery really took a lot longer than I ever expected. So that was in the mix. I think there's also the systems piece, right? You don't necessarily know what you're going to need until you are parenting, until your child has arrived, until you know what your child's sleep schedule is. Um, Fun fact, neither of my kids slept through the night until they were 14 months old each, right? Which is terrible. It was like being tormented. I remember I was hallucinating. And I thought I heard a baby crying all the time. I remember being at work thinking I heard a baby crying. So I was kind of losing my mind. And aware that I was kind of losing my mind, but still feeling like I had to function. So I share that because I should have raised the alarm with people in my life. I should have talked to my partner or my husband more intentionally about what was happening. I could have spoken to my doctors about what was happening. I could have asked for more help. I was very reluctant to ask for support at work, right, which I share in the book, because I was always the strategic problem solver. I didn't come to people with problems, I came to people with solutions. And it felt very off brand to explain or expose that I wasn't doing well. So, for all those reasons, it delayed me putting systems in place that really would have helped through the new parent phase. And then the second child phase, right, in our family. And I know for others who have multiple children, there are certain things that break then. You might have infrastructure that seems okay and works pretty well for one, but then when you have that next addition to the family, everything breaks once again. And having that exhaustion, whether it's because you're recovering from birth or because you are sleeping in the same room or in the same space as a child that wakes up every 90 minutes to 2 hours, all of that takes a lot out of our physical and emotional reserves.
Yeah, no, thank you. So well articulated. And I just want to underscore a couple of things because I want to circle back to this concept of identity shift. And it's interesting because you're kind of one of the identities I'm hearing you say you had to shift was I'm the go-to person. I solve things. And you had to become oh, I really need a network of support here. So,
Right. Like,
all
oh,
kind.
I'm now the hot mess person. How did that happen?
And
When
embracing
did that
that.
happen? Exactly. Embracing it. And that was hard.
Mhm. Well, again, there's just huge identity shifts that are happening. So I want to talk more about that and the whole idea of putting systems in place. We're going to circle back to that one too, because, again, uh, unlike you, I was really trying to solve this a long ways before I had a kid. And so I kind of knew ahead of time that I was going to think about this and that and the other thing. And it did help a lot. It really did. So, for example, I really knew I wanted to find a partner who would share responsibilities with me. And obviously, that's been a huge game changer in my life. But nevertheless, um, here you are suddenly becoming a parent. And it might be that you have this very strong assumption about what mothers are supposed to do, or in my husband's case, what fathers are supposed to do. And, what am I supposed to do as a career person now that I have this little thing that I don't know how to take care of that needs 24-hour care? So there is this huge concept of who am I and what roles am I playing? Was that challenging for you, some of those identities?
Absolutely. And, I often will share with people that, everyone wants to be excellent at everything, right? And parents are no exception. And if you pride yourself on being excellent or being competent, just having to manage a learning curve with so many things at once, where I remember like pretty much almost being like reduced to tears trying to make a swaddle happen because I didn't get it. Maybe if I were sleeping, it would have been easy for me to do, but it wasn't easy for me to do. The car seat, the like all the contraptions, I felt so burdened by having to learn all of these new things. It felt destabilizing to be inept at so many things at the same time, especially when it felt like I should have figured it out. And I assumed that other people figured it out. I thought I was alone in feeling like I had missed a memo and something important had been shared about, motherhood or parenting, and I just didn't see it. So all of that felt hard at the time. And then the work identity shift was really big. As I shared in the book, there was a period of my childhood where there was a lot of financial instability. So work was always like air. And income was like air. So suddenly feeling incompetent, and I put that in quotes, incompetent relative to how I was. Like, again, I'll say, because it is a privilege, I was healthy. I had tons of energy. I needed very little sleep. I could outwork most people. So all of that allowed me to define myself in my career by showing up a certain way. But when I was suddenly an exhausted, tired person who felt cognitively like fuzzy because I had a really rough night or several wake ups in the morning, or that swaddle situation was driving me bananas, right? Any of those things, I suddenly couldn't work in the same way. And the vulnerability associated with that was extremely uncomfortable because I certainly didn't want to talk to people about it. Like that felt off brand. And then also, as a woman of color and being like a very unusual sight in senior leadership, especially in public companies, I felt extra vulnerable about showing up strong and presenting myself as being excellent in this work. So all of those things kind of started to unravel me in ways that I didn't think about and understand until much later. Because
Yeah.
when you're in it, you're swimming, right?
Yeah.
And you're trying to shave a few seconds off your time every day because you're just like trying to get to the finish line, and that's very consuming.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, you're reminding me of one of the other very smart ways to set boundaries. You said use group power instead of personal power when it's not psychologically safe. And I think that's just so interesting because, there is many organizations that are not really supportive of helping people think differently about this. Well, I want to move to the positive here because what's exciting is there are so many answers, right? And I was talking with Leslie about how she wrote this beautiful blog post. You should go to her website, check it out, about Dr. Lynn Perry Wooten. And one of the things I was saying to Leslie was how this was such a great example of there's many different what we call North Stars when it comes to the solving work and family. And Dr. Lynn Perry Wooten's North Star was this amazing example of excellent full-time childcare, a very strong network of support around her through both the academic community and through the church community. I mean, it was just beautiful how well and she moved to a different community and built that network again. I mean, it's just gorgeous. And just to put it in a nutshell real quickly, here's Jeff and I who also said, hey, here's a different solution. All genders can cut back at work and we can share in that care responsibility. And so, Third Path's built on that idea that we can really support everybody. If they need more time to balance work and life, whether it's children or elder care, we can support them to create some space. And we can have, in two-parent households, both parents learn how to do that. There's no right answer. There's different North Stars. They're all beautiful. So where I want to go with that is that we're learning different things, and there's some commonalities in those North Stars. One is, please, as you leave today's webinar, understand care work is important and care work is hard. You need more than one person. You need a network. You need a whole system of people to help you, whether that's infant care, school age care, elder care. So lots of support, I think, is a really important theme, no matter which option you take. What are some other things that you think are really important that you've learned now that you can look back to build a stronger way to manage work and care that are going to work for people over the long run, in addition to lots of support? What else have you learned?
Well, I think it's such a great question. One is that having I'm saying negotiation, but I don't necessarily mean that it has to be overt negotiation. But especially if the psychological safety is not there, really showing that you're prioritizing in a way that is beneficial for you and beneficial for the organization. And that if you're being asked to do like 5 different things that all have the same deadline and require the same resources and overlap with the same department, like it's going to blow up, it's going to fall apart, and no one's going to be happy. And just being able to share that in a strategic way and force a conversation about thoughtful trade-offs or reallocation of resources. And doing so is very much in line with what leadership is and can elevate you, and it can elevate your team, and it can elevate the work that you do. So I think that's really important to have as a cornerstone, in addition to everything that you are changing, moving, flipping, trimming in your home, that even in those workplaces that are not necessarily the most family friendly, which sadly is common, knowing that if you speak ROI and present information in terms of success or failure and resources, that helps. It helps like create some pathways to get the work done without the same strain. So I put
Yeah.
that out there. I think the other thing is that as your children, because now, right, I have one child who is in high school, which is just like amazing to me. I have a 15-year-old, and that's a whole thing. Like I thought it was going to get easier as they got older, and it's not, right? But there's an age appropriate upskilling that almost needs to happen, right? As part of parenting. It's good for them, it's good for you, but I think that that's not obvious as to how to do that and when to do that, that your children, as they are older, can become part of the team, if that makes sense.
Love it. Such gems. Awesome. And I bet when, we could spend another hour talking about, if we go back to that work point you were making, that as you become this parent who also wants to do a great job at work, you get pretty smart at prioritization. And I have really seen how organizations benefit from this. And there's all kinds of tools out there that you can use to kind of manage up and make a smarter use of time. I'm wondering if you've seen one other thing that we've learned at Third Path, but to have time to prioritize, you actually have to have mental space to think. And so we teach a lot around figuring out how to have regular, what we call quiet time. In fact, our last podcast was this beautiful couple where they both learned really good skills around setting limits so they could have this. One of them actually called it a sacred time, because in order to prioritize, you have to actually have brain space to think about how to prioritize. I'm wondering if you're seeing that too.
100%. I mean, my research studies are kind of one input, and so I'm hearing from like thousands of people, mostly moms, but also dads and parents, about what is the hardest, and that feeling, that pressure that actually becomes internalized of just not having time, not having space, not having room to think is a real pressure, and it's an uncomfortable feeling. So it almost, to your, I think, to your brilliant name of your organization, the Third Path, we are being socialized to just be part of that. Let the ocean just sweep you away into busy land for the rest of your days. And it's a terrible feeling. We all know it's not good. We know it's not right, but yet it's what the tide is kind of pulling us towards. So there is that third path, right? There is that alternate way, but it does require some resistance to culture and some intentional pauses. And that generally that has to kind of happen on your calendar. There has to be space for that. I mean, can you double task? Like I do a lot of running. I run every single day, right? And a lot of my brilliant ideas do come while I'm running. So it could be that your movement and your quiet time for movement also becomes partly your reflection time. But I also try, and I say try because it's not consistently perfect, to carve out space at the end of the day and at the end of the week. And I usually try to carve out a week at the end of the quarter that are meeting free so that I can process everything that I've been doing, follow up with all the people that maybe I haven't followed up with, and just think about what needs to happen. So I do believe it needs to be intentional. I will say, though, for the past 5.5 years, I've been a full-time entrepreneur. When I was in corporate, before that, it is much more difficult to exercise that agency over your time. You have to use some different strategies to create it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for those who are at this live event today, we're going to get into this whole concept that Leslie was touching on about how we can kind of build this larger community of support. Even our young adult children can become part of our support. We're going to be talking about how we can, figure out how to share care with our partners. We actually have an expert who can help you think about how to expand grandparent support. So this theme of like really understanding that we want to build lives that have work and care, and we need to build lots of support is going to be a big thing that happens next as part of this live event. But I wanted to give Leslie the last word, because another important thing she's touched on and her book focuses on is that we kind of take for granted our health. But the truth is, if we're having a health issue, it really stops the show. And so I think a really important message in her book is why she literally calls it health span matters. So I wanted to give you a chance to talk a little bit about why health span matters.
Absolutely. There's so many things in that that are meaningful to me that I want to share with this audience. I mean, first of all, as Mary Pope Oliver would say, right, you get this one wild, precious life. Like we have it, seize it. I mean, of course, we want it to be as healthy and as full as it possibly can be. But a lot of the trade-offs that we feel compelled to make as caregivers, whether it's parenting for our kids or caring for aging parents, will kind of force us to trim along the edges in the wrong places, right? Like skip that workout, skip that mammogram, forget about that colonoscopy, or push it off until next year. And those are the trade-offs that can actually be life altering, especially as we reach stages in our 40s and 50s and 60s. Like those years are critically important for how our long-term health plays out. And the more that I've researched it and learned about it and interviewed incredible clinicians about it, like I've realized that that investment, I have to make it now. I can't put it off. Um, I strength train Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, right? And I like strength training as much as I like running? No, I do not. But I'm doing it because of bone density and bone health. And for women particularly, we're at greater risk for stress-related illness of all kinds. That includes hypertension, fatal heart disease, right? A whole slew of stress-related illnesses. But for everyone, there is the kind of biology of aging. And that, as I learned, and I reference it in my book, Dr. Peter Attia's book, he kind of calls it the centenarian like Olympics. And that, if when you're 100, if you want to be able to lift your own bag of groceries or put your, you know, luggage in the overhead by yourself, you have to do a lot of work in midlife to prepare for that, because our muscles, it's kind of not our friend over time if we're not caring for our muscles. So health for moms is my not so secret ministry. I think it's critical for everyone. Invest, even if it's a little bit of time. Doesn't have to be perfect. Don't feel guilty about doing it or not doing it. Just believe that you deserve it and believe that it will have a positive effect on all areas of your life.
Oh, thank you for those wise words, Leslie. So glad you could make it today. Really appreciate that you're out there doing the good work that you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was an honor to be here. I really appreciate this invitation and the incredible community and supportive resources that you have built.
Hi again. For those of you who are looking for some important takeaways, Melissa and I are going to do that right now. So, Melissa, another amazing conversation. What did you find most exciting from? I know there's so many exciting things, but what's one of the things that you found exciting from our conversation with Leslie Forde?
I first of all felt like Leslie just recorded that for me, that the whole conversation between you and Leslie was just for me. And I know it was, and I know there are going to be things that resonate for so many people. I really liked this concept from a caregiving standpoint around the identity shift. And I think whether we're talking about when a new baby comes along or when you shift into elder care or any of the lifespan changes that occur, this whole concept of an identity shift and having to really get comfortable with what that means for you as you take on this new role, and the importance of boundary setting as you learn this new identity. What are the boundaries that come into play?
Yes, because they go hand in hand. I mean, I'm even thinking about, here's Jeffrey, my husband, who's retired, and you'd think that the issue of boundary setting and identity shift, well, maybe you would understand that identity shift happens with this phase of life too, but it never stops being an issue of thinking about, okay, what did I expect at this stage of my life? What is it really like? Um, if there's something that's not working, how would a new way of thinking about boundaries help me more? How can I communicate that with that person in a way where I decrease the odds of it not being heard well? Because the intention is a solution that really works for you and whoever you're having that conversation with. So it just never stops, doesn't it? It's like that was the whole point, I think, of this event was to say, when you become a new parent, it is a huge change. And the more you can think outside the box, perhaps even become, before you become a new parent, the more options you will open up for how to solve it. And then those options will continue to be a resource for the rest of those many other changes that you'll be facing. I know there was so much more, and I want to talk a little bit about, how she talked about health being really important too. Is there anything else you want to say about identity shifts and boundary setting?
I just think we need to expect the unexpected. I think that we can decide we're going to be a certain person when this new role hits, and then there's the reality. And I think one of the things I took away from and really reflected on in my life as my identity has shifted several times over life, it's about right sizing your expectations. So you expected something to be some way, and now it's not, and you're not who you thought you were going to be. And so that whole idea of accepting what is, this is actually who I am in this role. And so this is how I want to approach it, and not going for perfectionism, but just saying this is going to be good enough. I'm doing just fine the way I am. And that concept about giving yourself grace, and I really mean right sizing expectations. I think that makes a huge difference in our mental health and in turn in our physical health, which is what we're going to talk about next.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, and what really, what Leslie's book does so well and what she talked about in the conversation so thoughtfully was it's happening at home, it's happening at work. It's happening at home, it's happening at work. There's like no place in your life where these ideas don't get thoughtfully applied. And so I'm thinking about something we talk about at Third Path all the time about the triple win. And so when she was talking about the work side of things, what she said is to prioritize. And boy, do we talk about that all the time, where, you know, you can actually improve processes because you have a thoughtful employee who says to you as the manager, hey, you know what? I've got 5 things on my list and I don't really have time to do them all well. Can we make sure we've got them organized where the most important thing is the one I spend the most time on? And then we do good enough, like you were talking about, for this task number 4 and 5. And the more you can have good communication with your manager at work about, what's the priority list? And then if something new comes in, where does it fit into that priority list? And, this is a skill we learn at work and we can also use at home. What's most important in our family, and things that get lost. We're going to talk about health in a second, but I think another thing that gets lost is time for the couple to spend time together. But I know that when couples function well together, everything else functions better. So that hopefully you take some baby steps to, if that's really important, to make more time for it. So anything else about how, we are trying to set some boundaries that are thoughtful. We're changing our identities, and then let's talk about health, unless you have something else.
Yeah, the only other thing I want to add is around taking responsibility in transparency and in communication. I think particularly if you're young in your career, if you're a new parent and you're young in your career, it could feel weird to think about managing up. The tip that you were just giving around being able to say, "Hey, what are my top priorities? I don't really have time to do all of this." That I would say, having been a manager, being able to come forward, like hearing your employees say, I have a problem and I have a potential solution, and that gets to our triple win. But that comfort level in knowing that it's okay to manage up, and when you were just talking about how this works out in a partnership, in a relationship, what is your comfort level with being able to say, "Hey, it's not working right now. This is not okay, and we really need to course correct at this point." So I think where do we find that confidence and just know that it's okay to have needs and to assert those needs? That's typical, and asserting those needs, identifying them and asserting them in a productive way is the or that's the beginning steps to being able to ease up on any of the pressures that you're feeling during these different identity shifts.
Oh my gosh. And you're giving us a sneak preview of where we're going because after we heard from Leslie, we got everybody to break into small groups and talk about different stages in the life cycle and how they're managing. What did we hear over and over again? How good communication was critical, having some courage to speak up when things weren't going well. I talked over and over again about how having that person you can talk to and vent to so you can find the right words to then speak to that person, the manager, the person at home, whatever, so great. We have more to come about what happened after the Leslie Forde conversation. What were some tips and really important points she made about health?
Oh, I think that one piece that really spoke to me today, in my current situation is when we are trying to provide care for others. She talked about that you trim away your self-care. And, how do we continue to prioritize our own care? And that she what I took away from some of the things Leslie was talking about is, it doesn't seem like very much right now that I chose not to take a walk today, that I can't figure out how to find the time to lift those weights like she was talking about. It doesn't feel like a lot right now, but it does have a long-term impact. And so perhaps being able to, without pressure, kind of look at the long game and say, this is who I'm hoping to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, however long. None of that time's guaranteed to us, but if we have it, how are we hoping to really make the most of it? So I really would like to hold myself accountable at this point to pay attention to where I'm trimming away that self-care and try to add it back for myself.
Yeah. And I do think there's some seasonality. I mean, she talked about this from the point of view that she can see now her 15-year-old can help with some of the household stuff. And so if you're a new parent listening in today, we get it. Like you're just trying to, as she said, stay afloat, swimming. So please, let's remember there's seasonality to when we can do more or less of this. And you might be at a stage where it's just really hard to think about this. Another tip that I think she mentioned was around managing your health in a way that kind of can be a win-win is finding those activities that feel fun. Maybe she said, I run and it gives me time to think. I walk and it gives me time to think. I go to an exercise class that has great music and it has strength training. So like find the thing that hopefully brings a little joy along with the goal of health, a better health span activity. Any other thoughts about health span before we talk about where we turned the conversation after this?
Oh, I think I'm ready to talk about where we turned the conversation. And I just have to say, our live events are so exciting because we have this opportunity to hear from an expert like Leslie, who just was so insightful. And then we have that opportunity to actually talk together in small groups. And I loved, I mean, it's always so exciting for us. Those always are we really knock it out of the park because we always find that people love time to process what they've heard and to really be able to dig into an area that is currently like what's your current trouble area, where are you challenged right now.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Wonderful. Thanks. Well, what we did was, as Melissa mentioned, we this time we broke into kind of where you are in the life stages. Although I talked about something that's kind of across all stages. My group looked at workload. And It was really interesting because really what we saw, I mean, I wish there was new information out there, but honestly, we all face some of the same challenges. And what we really took away is the culture you're in can really make it really difficult around workload. And, maybe the support you need is how do I find the next step, maybe to move away from that place or move to a different team within that same work culture. Um, and, for example, someone said, yes, there's delegating, but if you are seen as weak because you need to actually get support, it's just there's so many crazy cultures out there around this issue. But it's good to start separating out because the other point, someone who had a more supportive culture realized, taking back that point of delegation, that, she learned I need to delegate earlier in the process. So it's not, I joked with my group, we're a supportive workplace. I'm a pretty good supportive manager, and we still face overload sometimes. So there is some skills we need personally. And if you're in that not great work culture, it maybe get some support to think about, is there some sort of change in the horizon for you? Your group looked at work and family. There was also a group that looked at sharing the mental load. What were some takeaways from those groups?
So on the work, and particularly we were talking about younger family, this concept that your support networks really are the key, and you shouldn't have to go it alone. And if you feel like you're in a place where you are trying to go it alone, it's time to kind of take a look around you and figure out, is that somebody in your extended family? Is that somebody in your social network? Is it somebody that you work with? You don't need to completely feel isolated, and it does feel isolating when you're in a challenge spot. So I think that that big key around support is everything. Don't be afraid to say you're having a hard time. It is hard to say that, but also when you say it, you actually have an opportunity to kind of to make a change. And that dovetails really beautifully into this whole concept around sharing the mental load. Um, you have to be able to speak out about that too if you're overloaded on sharing the mental load. And I know several of us, gender notwithstanding, that if you are the primary flexor, meaning you are the person who is primarily responsible for getting things done at home and providing care either to children or elders or whoever, if that's your role, it it's very easy to become the default person, and it really becomes so necessary to start having the conversation, just like you said about delegation. You need to talk about it early. And I think this idea that you need to be talking about some of the mental load things before they become too heavy, because once the resentment builds, it's very hard to bounce back out of that. So don't worry about, you know, don't worry about the fact that this is an issue. Worry if you're not saying something, that it just gets heavier and heavier, and then it really does become a drain on your relationship.
Yeah, such good advice. It's really actually something we've seen a lot of couples where they're, again, it could be the dad who's the primary flexor. It could be two moms and one is more flexing than the other. But whoever is the primary flexor, it starts out like, I'm happy doing the flexing. I'm doing a lot of work and I have a demanding job. And then it becomes, I'm flexing more and I'm getting a little resentful and I still have a demanding job. And I'm flexing even more and I still have a demanding job. And the dynamics can get, challenging. So it can be hard for couples to speak up. Get some support, whether that's talking to your friend or your sister, to get some courage to speak up because it's so beautiful when you can get to those better answers. And it doesn't mean it's going to be beautiful all the time, but it will be really beautiful. Wonderful. We also had a breakout group around elder care and late career uncertainty, which those two are overlapping because elder care is completely uncertain when it's going to happen. But there's also a lot of other things that can happen, like career health issues, retirement, grandkids, no grandkids. So it's a really interesting time of life. We thought for sure when you and I were back in the day, just focus on people balancing work and family. And then we were like, oh, it's work and elder care. Now it's like, oh. So I hope the big message everybody listening in today is getting, this stuff doesn't go away. And so the more you learn those skills, or maybe a way of looking at it, life gives you lots of opportunities to keep on learning these skills. Good communication, get support. You've got lots and lots of opportunities where you're going to see the value of these things. Wonderful. So we covered a lot of ground. We covered a lot of topics. People were there and very energetic. It was a lot of fun. Leslie gave a great conversation for us about, how new parenthood does change things. If we think outside the box, it can really change things for the better. What are some last takeaways that you had from this, yet again, wonderful podcast?
I'm starting to feel like I'm a broken record in our takeaways, that I keep ending up talking about the importance of good communication and walking away with this concept of every time we solve a problem, it's an iterative process. And it is like a muscle that we just keep toning and really flexing, that we get better each time at being able to solve what you just called the opportunities that keep coming up in our lives to try out these skills over and over again. And I just can't let go of intentionality. We are hearing about this. We know that these things, identity shifts are going to happen. You're going to hit these speed bumps around who's carrying more of the mental load, who's doing more work. Elder care is going to come. So what are your intentions, and how do you work towards, we just must give this some attention now, and so that we can work through an issue and come out the other end of it.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, in my overload work group, little think group, I said, look, I wish I could tell you that I had this solved, but I don't. This is stuff that we keep on learning about. So, and I keep on in fact, I learned a new idea with my husband recently because he's retired, I'm not. So how do we kind of communicate around my workload that he's not feeling frustrated with? And so, anyways, you just keep on learning. That's the bottom line. You keep on learning. So if you're looking for some more resources on these topics, please, we've got great free resources on our website, and sign up for our newsletter, because this week we're actually sending out all the handouts that went with the live event, so that people can access this information. We're a nonprofit. We want to make a difference for people right now, get you as much information as we can. So check out our website, sign up for our newsletters, and thanks again for listening in. Keep taking your third path.